Russia's interference with our 2016 election and connections to the Trump campaign is a tangled web, to say the least. How important do you think it is to our democracy that the Mueller investigation continues free from political pressure from the president?
Of course, I believe, based on intelligence reports, that the Russians did hack the election, and it's crucial to understand if there was any assistance on any part of any American citizen in doing that. So it's crucial.
Does it come as a surprise to you that Russian interests would collect compromising information on someone, for example, President Trump or candidate Trump, to gain leverage over that person?
So the Russian, Vladimir Putin is a former KGB agent. As I said, there's no such thing as a former KGB agent. There's only present KGB agents. In the KGB, they recruit people with no empathy and no morals, and they then train them to go out and to influence people with using one of two ways, either with bribery or with blackmail and extortion. And they figure out what you could bribe somebody with, and they figure out what people are scared of to extort or blackmail them. And so that's their modus operandi, and so it's entirely plausible that they would have looked at all people who would potentially influence leaders in America and try to figure out if they're bribable or extortable.
And that's one of the reasons that Sally Yates was fired as acting attorney general, raised certain concerns about some of Trump's campaign operatives and their dealings with Russia. Because as you described, this is a modus operandi for the Russians to collect incriminating evidence on their targets so that they can gain leverage or control over them.
This is exactly what they do. There's actually a Russian word for it. It's called kompromat, which means to collect compromising information about the target. And the Russians do that on a regular basis. They've been doing it on me for 7.5 years. They do it on everybody to try to find some way to influence the people that they want to influence.
And you mentioned that you have been a target of Putin's Russia ever since they kicked you out. And so is this a daily concern for you that you need to have security, you need to have people who are always alert to your safety and that of your family?
Yes, the Russian government has made a number of threats against my life. They've threatened me with death. They've threatened me with kidnapping. The Russian government has tried and failed 3 times to have me put on the Interpol most wanted list so I could be arrested as traveling. They've tried to extradite me from the UK where I live. They've sued me for libel. They've made movies about me. There's probably 250 people working inside of the Russian security services and law enforcement agencies on the Bill Browder story full time, trying to destroy me in whatever way they can.
We learned this morning that it's not just the repeal of the Magnitsky Act, which it is highly unlikely that that would happen, but there certainly would be efforts to try to weaken the act and to figure out ways to get people off the Treasury's Office of Foreign Asset Control list. So are there things we can do to make sure that that kind of a loophole is not created under the Magnitsky Act?
Well, I like Senator Whitehouse's idea of making it when a person is added to the list, to make it an act of Congress as opposed to an executive decision to remove them from that list.
Thank you. With regard to the Russian government's continuing efforts and Ms. Veselnitskaya's efforts to repeal or weaken the Magnitsky Act, how did that fit into their broader campaign to interfere in the 2016 election?
Well, it's not clear to me how the two are exactly related. We know what they wanted, which was to have the Magnitsky Act repealed. Whether there was any, maybe perhaps they thought that the probability of that was higher with their preferred candidate than the more preferred candidate than their less preferred candidate. I'm not 100% certain that they wouldn't have made the same attempt with the Democratic candidate, Hillary Clinton, if there was any opening or receptivity there. The Russians are nonpartisan when it comes to interference into foreign policy and U.S. affairs. They would gladly talk to, try to bribe and try to blackmail anybody.
You describe a scenario or an environment in which they are totally ruthless in trying to achieve their ends, and it doesn't matter who they work with. If they sense a weakness in someone, they will go after that person and figure out how to gain leverage over that person. After you contacted the Department of Justice regarding FARA noncompliance, have you received any updates from them regarding the complaint you sent to them in July? And at the time of the complaint, did you have any reason to believe that any of the individuals involved had met with any political campaign people?
I've received no updates since July, and that we know for sure that part of their campaign was running around Capitol Hill. One of their biggest, one of the people that they were able to convince to go along with them is a member of the House of Representatives from Orange County, Dana Rohrabacher, who they have met with on a number of occasions, and who has been effectively touting spreading their propaganda around the House of Representatives.
We had a hearing yesterday about the FARA, and there's another law called the Lobbying Disclosure Act. Have you given any thought to the juxtapositioning of these two laws and how FARA registration has dropped considerably since the passage of the Lobbying Disclosure Act? Do you have any thoughts about how we can make sure that FARA remains the important registration act?
Yeah, there's a loophole you can drive a truck through in the Lobbying Disclosure Act, which says that you don't have to register using FARA if you're a company. And as we've discussed here, there's a number of companies that are effectively acting as proxies of the state, and so something needs to be done to close that loophole.